All right, hi everybody. I am Harlan Meyer, and I am the managing principal over at BrightBuilt Home, which is a architectural design and project services company based here in Portland, Maine. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and also more specifically what modular is and how it is that we engage with the modular manufacturing industry to bring high performance homes to life. So just go through this list real quick. I'm going to talk about who we are, what modular is, what the project delivery process looks like, why and how we build net zero, and so how we're putting our mark on things, so to speak, so we can get to high performance in net zero. So just real quick, we're a firm based here in Portland, Maine. We have currently 12 people on our team. We operate out of the Old Port, and we were founded in 2013 as a sort of an offshoot to an existing architecture firm in Portland called Kaplan Thompson Architects. And we were founded on the premise of making high performance more attainable, more accessible, using essentially a pre-existing portfolio of existing designs as starting points, so that people who are interested in building net zero but didn't really have a good feel for where to kick things off, they could start from one of these existing designs and then make modifications, customize, so that it better suited their site and their personal needs. These are 4 examples of homes that we've completed in the last 10 years. The upper left and bottom right are actually custom designs, and then the upper right and bottom left are based off of our pre-existing portfolio. So we do both custom and modified, what we call tailored on those pre-existing designs. In 2018, then, we launched also a suite of AUs, accessory dwelling unit designs, so anything sub 1,000 square feet, as part of an acknowledgement of obviously the housing crisis and just kind of this growing interest in living smaller, living more compact, being more efficient with space. This is just our mission as a company. We really, as I said, we're looking to engage with the offsite construction industry as a way to tap into this existing infrastructure in order to deliver on high performance at a larger scale. So I wanted to touch a little bit on what modular is. I do suspect that many people in the room have a good sense of it, but just to sort of get all on the same page, many people historically have associated modular or kind of have that mental association with mobile or manufactured housing. But modular is in fact a much closer relative to site-built homes, stick-built homes. They honor all the same IRC codes, and they're aligned with really standard construction that's basically been reverse engineered to be built off-site. You see 4 images on this page depicting kind of that traditional pre-1906 mobile home, and then in 1976 the transition to that HUD manufactured housing home, panelized and modular. So modular is that home on the bottom right-hand corner. That's one of our earlier homes, and as you can see, obviously it has all the appearances of being a standard single-family home. That is also the case for its mode of construction. So that's modular. And then to just drill down a little bit on that, so really, as the name suggests, a traditional home is essentially segmented into individual boxes. So this is volumetric modular as opposed to panelized, where the shell of the home is built off-site and then brought on-site sort of in a flat pack model. These are homes that are essentially fully built off-site and then but segmented such that they can be shipped over the road and then brought onto site and assembled into a full home. This is an image showing a diagram essentially of how each of these homes that were built using modular construction were comprised of individual modules. So you can see the upper left, that was a 4-box. The one to the upper right was a 2-box. And then in this instance, where you can see that dormer going across the second floor, that would have been a component that was built off-site and then flown in as a sort of a pre-assembled module unto itself. And then the entirety of that second floor in that instance is finished on-site. So that's a hybrid, but you're getting to a fully weathered-in, protected structure from day one. Bottom left would have been a single module, and then bottom right was actually 5 modules. So clearly one of the really significant advantages to modular construction is that you have substantial completion before it ever even arrives on site. You have a home that has all the sheetrock, has all of its plumbing and electrical systems roughed in, all the window trim installed and painted, all the windows obviously installed, interior doors installed with interior trim, and essentially all of the paint throughout the house up to basically a primer coat or a complete solid white. Likewise, you also have all the kitchen cabinetry installed. You might have kitchen countertops installed, sinks, all the plumbing, bathroom fixtures, etc. So you can get upwards of 70 to 90% completed structure delivered to the site from the factory. So all of that takes place undercover, in shelter, in a climate-controlled environment. What that also means is that you have shorter overall time on site. So while things are being constructed in the factory, the general contractor can be working on site, excavating, clearing, putting in the septic system, putting in the well, and doing all of that stuff that typically in construction is a linear process of sequencing one after the other. This can then happen concurrently. So your house is getting framed, roughed in, painted, trimmed, etc., while you're digging a hole in the ground and putting in the foundation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to go, when those modules get delivered on site, they get set with a crane, and you go from an open foundation to a fully weathered-tight, weathered-in, weatherproof home in one day. So it's a pretty phenomenal thing to see these homes come together and to recognize that you're going from a very exposed site to a fully enclosed structure in that single day. Certainly the general contractors and their teams and the subs love it because they don't have months of exposed studs, exposed components to that weather. And you can see in this instance, in this image, this was in a midwinter set. And so they went from pretty cold conditions to what could be a heated space in a single day. And then, of course, because you're having a house that's arriving substantially complete, you have a much shorter time on site in the aftermath with the finish out. So finishes, flooring, in most cases countertops, any tile. You're doing a lot of surface finishes, and you may be building some of the outdoor components, the decks, porches, etc. But you're really starting from a much, much further advanced level of completion. So it shortens that time as well. So I'll talk a few minutes now about project delivery. At BrightBuilt, every person that we work with, every homeowner that we work with has a team of at least 3, sometimes 4. Sometimes 4 is the interior designer. That's a little bit dependent on the individual client. But we have a project pilot who is the primary interface with the homeowner, primary communications manager. The architectural designer handles the design, and a construction liaison who works with the general contractor and the manufacturer to kind of keep the lines of communication open and ensure that the house is being built to our performance spec. The design I've already spoken to, but essentially we start from either one of those known starting points in our portfolio or from scratch and work with clients to design the home they're looking to do. And then we go into the off-site manufacturing. So this is the piece I'm obviously getting at a lot today, which is really that undercover, climate-controlled environment. You can see here we have the components of the house coming together in these images. The exterior walls are getting their dense packed insulation. We do a 10-inch double stud wall in our homes using either dense packed cellulose or dense packed timber fill. We're just obviously really focusing on that performance spec and taking advantage of that climate-controlled environment. So then, obviously, the finishing touches after the modules arrive on site, and that's where that takes place. So, obviously, I think modular over the years, by virtue of for various reasons, has a little bit of a reputation or a little bit of a stigma with low quality. But so sometimes we get asked, well, how can you make modular high performance? That the image I showed a couple slides ago, that's one example. So here we're taking advantage of this existing infrastructure where you have standard practices of construction. We're still building with stud walls, we're still building with wood components, we're still building in the same essential foundational manner as you see in modular manufacturers, but we're looking for advanced specifications. We're basically starting from first principles of building science in terms of the different things that we're looking to achieve with our homes. So yeah, we're really aiming at leveraging building science and bringing it into this existing infrastructure of the offsite manufacturing industry. So we want a better envelope. Like I said earlier, we've got deep, dense packed cellulose. So we're looking for a nominal R40. It's very derivative from the pretty good house principles, if you're familiar with those. And we're also looking to manage airflow and vapor in this wall assembly. So we have a vapor retarder on the inside face, and we use a vapor open membrane on the outside. We also have really energy efficient mechanical systems. So this is a really key component to home performance. You want to make sure you have ventilation, managed ventilation, coming outside air, pre-warmed, pre-filtered, bringing fresh air into the space, and then stale air being extracted. So it's a really, really important piece of high performance construction. And then the hot water components, we also tap that same technology that's used for the heating and cooling in the air source heat pumps and use that for heat pump hot water heaters as well. That keeps all of the systems running really efficiently. I'm going to start moving faster because I'm running out of time. So better windows and doors, and then planning and follow through. So we run energy models for all of our homes and then run blower door tests for verification of performance. So couple quick slides. This is probably a little bit preaching to the choir in this room, but what are the reasons for striving for net zero? One is escalating energy costs. This is a graph of electrical costs for from 1990 to 2023. You can see that continued climb. And then pair that with the decreasing cost of solar. So solar being a technology, it continues to be more cost effective and more cost efficient. So those two together render it a lot of sense to going net zero. This is another just sort of foundational or ethical reason why to pursue high performance, of just how much carbon emissions are involved in the building industry as well as embodied carbon. I'm going to run through these really quickly as I'm running out of time, but I wanted to do a couple case studies on our homes just to do a little bit of a compare contrast between sort of a higher end home and then sort of a kind of a more compact, cost efficient home as just examples, and show the specs of the home. So this example is a 28 by 48 foot home. It's about 2,400 square feet, has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, lofted living area, covered entry, open back deck, and a walkout basement with a partial finish. The timeline for this home was about 5 months in design, 3 months in production and site prep, so that concurrent time that I was talking about earlier, where you can truncate the overall construction time, and then roughly 5 months for on-site completion, systems installed, finishes, etc. And then this is the energy model for that home. So you can see the different components we're exploring here. We're plugging in all of the values of the systems that we're using and evaluating the performance of the home to determine what the peak load is. You can see in the middle there on the top. So that helps inform the sizing of the energy systems, heating and cooling systems, and you can also see the size of the PV system that we're recommending for this home. This other case study then is that smaller home. This is an 18 by 48 foot footprint with a vaulted space, 1,200 square feet of finished living space. Was a main floor with a loft, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a walkout basement with a covered porch, and it had a solar shed for the solar power. This had a somewhat similar timeline, 4 months in design, 3 months in production and site prep, and 5 months of on-site completion. And then here again is this energy model workup that we did. This one obviously requires a smaller sized PV array, smaller home, smaller footprint, smaller loads. It's got a smaller peak load. Also, if you look at that window energy in the bottom right, you can see that number's red. That's because this house actually had an easterly facing orientation as opposed to what we typically try to do with a due south orientation, which would definitely help the window energy and the solar heat gain from that south orientation. This is also why this had a solar shed, because the optimal orientation of the house didn't support solar as readily. So that's what we aim to do, and that's how we're leveraging modular specifically to be high performance.
I think we can move to questions. We were asked to keep the questions about offsite fabrication in general for the panel here, and if you'd like to talk with any of us individually about our brands or our offerings, we'd welcome you to visit us at our booths as well. Sure.
You guys do much in the realm of multifamily, and how does the cost factor in? Is it Is it comparable to regular stick build or?
We do multifamily up to the transition from IRC to IBC, the International Residential Code, to the International Building Code, which is to say we can go up to triplexes and townhouses, and that's mostly a business decision on our part because our sister company does a lot of multifamily work.
I guess my question is more with cost, but more in the realm of like in general, does the cost of building modular, is it cheaper or really comparable with not building modular?
So for modular specifically, you do, so if you're building apples to apples, the exact same specifications, what we generally see is a savings from the standpoint of the project timeline. You're on time for a shorter amount, but you do have some costs in modular that you don't have in site in terms of transportation and crane. But because of that time on site, you end up with generally an overall savings on the project. By virtue of that, the costs themselves aren't drastically different from one to the other if you're building the exact same specifications.
What's the regulatory process look like in terms of who does the inspections? Is it a state level inspection, or do the local business, the local building inspectors do the inspection? How does that work?
It probably looks different a little bit for the difference between the two approaches because for modular, because a lot of the rough-in happens and the insulation inspections need to happen, they handle that basically through a two-phase inspection process. So all manufacturing facilities, all modular manufacturers in the country have to have a third-party inspection agency with whom they work that they bring in for every project to complete essentially a series of checklists and verify compliance with the local codes that then conveys as essentially a package with the house to the site so that the local town CEO can do their inspections and follow suit in kind of the final closeout inspection of the house, but they'll see documentation to reflect compliance with whatever the local codes are.
What do you all anticipate in terms of impact with the coming tariffs on building costs and materials?
It's the billion-dollar question right now. As you probably saw, the Canadian lumber was left off the table for tariffs in the most recent round, which bodes well for the lumber costs. But what we're hearing, and I don't know if you guys are hearing differently, is we're seeing the prediction around about a 4 to 6% increase on overall final cost for construction. And that's a guess. I mean, all of it is guesswork. Nobody really knows what the impact's going to be. I think particularly with lumber being left out, it's possible that number might adjust down. But yeah, it's one of those, basically as soon as 2020 rolled around, the ability to predict costs kind of went up in smoke. It is one thing that is important to note is that all three of our companies utilize materials that are they're not crazy, they're not necessarily being imported from overseas, they're generally local raw materials. We're working with wood fiber, cellulose, things that are reasonably achievable, or I'm not coming up with the right word, but readily available materials. And so I think that will make a big difference if it aligns well with a low embodied carbon objective. So that's one way to help mitigate. Some of the things that are being heavily impacted right now are steel, and most of us are using primarily lumber, based assemblies. So that also helps, that approach.
Do you estimate an estimate for footage, square foot cost for the?
That's the other billion-dollar question. It totally depends on the scale of the project and all the selections. My favorite analogy used when it comes to what does something cost is, well, it's somewhat akin to asking what does a bag of groceries cost, because it depends on what's in the bag. And it even depends on where you're getting that bag from. But we're typically seeing, and this is not just us, BrightBuilt, but in kind of industry-wide, I would say we're seeing anything from you're talking about a pretty standard 1,500 square foot or above sized home in the neighborhood of 500 to 700 per square foot. That's an advantage in general on offsite construction, is that you do so much of the planning up front and so much of the thinking and sourcing and selections up front that you can come to that kind of final estimate much sooner in the process rather than that more drawn out kind of cost plus model, which is more just as it comes, as those costs come together. And if you accumulate that and total that at the end of the project, you might be looking at a much different number than you were anticipating at the outset.
Yes. So, I grew up in the 60s in western Massachusetts, and there were these large-scale, flood home developments, and they were all very similar homes. Boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, I'm curious in terms of where the modular and manufactured home industry can go, seeing that we're simply not building at the scale anymore. And it feels like you have to sort of economy of scale when you're building several homes in the same design, going to a similar location. And that doesn't seem to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, what we're seeing is a transition in kind of the overarching psychology of what type of home people want to live in, and a departure from that kind of willingness, I would say, to living in more of a development style setting. But also, I think,
To Jason's point, there's also, the numbers aren't penciling out as well for developers now, so I think it's a less appealing business model, for lack of a better characterization. But it's so I think that's another reason. But absolutely need to come to a solution that is a feasible model again, whether it's through subsidies or affordable housing programs or other mechanisms.
Because we don't want to see the quality of housing go down in order to meet those needs.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you so much.
thank you.